Thank you very much. Well, I would like to call the meeting to order. Guys, we're live. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Inuit, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Brent McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the meeting this morning. To my left is Robert Paluk, and to his left is Richard Whitebread. Our assessor today is Matthew Barakas, and our recording secretary is Belle Henro. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Ms. Rojo, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony. Thank you very much.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Stephen Barakas.
And do you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Do you have a mic on your headset?
Can you speak a little louder?
Oh, here, I'll just turn myself up. Does this help at all?
That's better,
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Mark Newman?
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first item on the docket today is 505 Rouge Road. And gentlemen, any preliminary issues on this one?
Nope.
Matt?
No.
Nope. Okay, Matthew, you may proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. File 22-2088, roll number 075531511100, 505 Rouge Road, roll year 2023, assessed value 15,458,000. It's apartments, 4 buildings on one property, 1974, 3 stories. We don't have any effective age on the property. 140 suites, 154 outdoor parking spots. The applicant and I, we talked about this building and actually all these buildings ahead of time. So I'm going to make a small recommendation off the modeled value. So my recommendation is going to be 15,133,000.
133?
133, yes.
And the reason?
So basically, once reviewing the applicant's evidence, we had discussed there's a $325,000 roof repair that is imminent. There's photographs. The applicant is going to be able to go into better detail than I can. I just think upon negotiation, a knowledgeable vendor and purchaser would factor this in the form of putting a one-time large lump sum deduction off of an otherwise market valuation. So I'll pause there and then I'll let the applicant address that.
Mark, are you aware of the recommendation?
I'm aware, and as the assessor has said, we have spoken extensively on these properties, and you'll see recs, which will be accepted on a number of them. It's not being accepted on this one, although it's a good start. The primary issue that I'm going to raise on the balance of the properties where I'm not accepting the rec is the capitalization rate. So the focus will be around that issue on those properties where the rec is not accepted.
Okay, Matthew, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to page 2, you see they've been very good at handing in their mailers consistently, no problems there. There's been no recent sales either. So on page 3, this is the modeled valuation in which the initial valuation prior to the deduction for the roof replacement actually. So those are all modeled parameters. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but you can see that there's 93 one-bedroom and 47 two-bedroom suites, so a mix. 5.4 is our cap rate as per our model. Rent comparables are on page 4. As indicated, it's preliminary a cap rate issue. These, so I'm not going to dwell on them for too long. These are all in the vicinity. The rent assigned by the model is at below the rent comparables. That the rent comparables similar in age, unit breakdown, supportive of the model income. Cap rate chart found on page 5. So these are some sales. I'm sure you've probably seen them already. That I was able to find. Look at the 3-year stabilized income and expenses, and in tandem with the sale price, be able to generate a cap rate. We had some other sales that were in this chart before, but with some more research, we found out there were some associations or they were sold as a package with other properties. So those were removed. That is something that we rightfully take into consideration. So you can see that there's a range from 3.6 to 5.74. So it's not the entire range of our model cap rates, but it shows kind of like the middle percentage there. I think we're at 4.8 to 5.6 or 5.8 on our distribution. So it's not meant to be specific to this property. It's just meant to show real life examples. You go to page 6, you can see that multifamily row 4.8, 5.6, high rise to low rise. So those sales that I provided do line up with what the model is putting out. So just as a test to see, you know, how accurate the model is being. So it looks like we're doing good. We're at 5.4 on this property. Flipping through, then there's municipal excerpts. That's kind of a bolt-on. Page 8, subject property income and expense review. This is some analysis I did. I looked at 3 years on the property. You can see the most recent year, the calculated net operating income and the modeling net operating income are highly similar. In the year prior, the calculated NOI was higher. In 2018, it was only 744,000. They did a lot more utilities and maintenance that year. And then the rest of my brief is just mailers. I've got the 2020 to 2018 mailers of the property. One thing to note on this property, let me just pull it up on my other sheet here, is in regards to the vacancy. They have pretty low vacancy on the property. It's lower than the 4.2%, or no, this one's 3.2. Sorry, 3.2 percent vacancy. I just had it open. I don't know why it disappeared. Let me pull this up quickly. I apologize. Okay, here we go. So for Rouge Road, the actual 3-year average vacancy is 1.54%. The model vacancy is 3.2. So roughly half, looks like there's strong demand for this property. Tenancy strength would give an investor confidence in purchasing the property. So that being said, the remainder of my brief from page 12 onwards is just photographs of the property. You can see that it looks like it's been maintained, but it really hasn't been updated, hence the lack of effective age on the property. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mark, any questions?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Barakis, let's just talk about the capitalization rate, the model. And you know, we've got a number of different properties on the docket this morning of varying ages, of varying sizes. In terms of the model capitalization rate, if I were to say to you, what is the most important factor, or what are the most important factors in determining the capitalization rate? Would it be age? Would it be size? Would it be some combination? What's the most important criteria?
I mean, I'm not a modeler, so I don't know what the most important criteria would be. Age and size are definitely things that are taken into consideration. The area that the property is in, a property in the downtown core area and a property in White Ridge, otherwise exactly the same, are still going to have a different cap rate applied to them. But in terms of the most important, they have never provided me a formula or anything, so I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
Okay, and so what you do on page 5, you provide us with a series of examples of 6 different properties of varying ages, of varying sizes, and as you say, that's not intended to be site specific, but it's simply intended to provide an indication of the range.
Yes, these are examples that I was able to dig up. I went through, I don't know, like 100 probably, just to find ones that were behaving in a manner where they didn't have up and down years reported to us, where I could confidently put them in a cap rate chart, present them to the board.
And in terms of effective age, the property in Maryland with an effective age of 1972 would be most similar to the subject at 1974.
I mean, that effective age, that's what we have in our model to reflect the renovations that happened, I believe, in 2013 prior to the sale. I mean, the foundation is not 1972, the framing is not 1972, but they've redone the inside and done some HVAC work. So that's just a way of trying to estimate and capture the improvements that they've made. But in terms of being similar to the subject property, I would probably say actually, probably the properties more like Bertrand, Corden, Arden, they would be more similar, given just the house, like the foundations from that vintage, and they weren't really fixed up or improved. They're kind of more basic as per our records, and that's what I'm seeing in the photographs of the subject property. So I would probably look at those actually more so than Maryland.
Okay, and for 2020, the cap rate on this property was 5.6%, correct?
Yeah, that's what the border revision went with.
And as you noted, the effective age on this property of the built age of 1974 has not seen any change to the effective age, because although it's maintained, it's not been upgraded or improved.
Agreed, yes.
And then at page 6 of your report, this is the chart of various capitalization rates. This building and the categories for multifamily: high rise, low rise A, low rise B. Let's leave high rise aside, but the low rise categories, they are there to reflect the terminology used by the various brokerage firms.
Yeah, that is correct. I don't know the difference between a low rise A and B. I know that's a distinction that CBRE makes, but we got the same 20th to 80th percentile for all low rise categories regardless.
But I'll suggest to you, and just based on its age and its condition, lack of improvements, this is more likely to fall into the low rise B category. Would you agree?
I mean, I don't know what the definition of those categories are. It doesn't look like there's any sort of issue other than, I mean, the roof needs to be fixed, but that's just a capital repair that comes around once every, couple decades or whatever, how long the roof lasts. So I wouldn't say maybe like it's not busted down. It's got very strong, better than market tenant demand on it. Could be a great candidate for renovation, but we're not assessing it at that. We're just assessing how it is. So I'm just looking at it as a low rise, not a premium or deduction or anything like that.
All right. And even though we try and put a number on things, of course, within every category, there's always going to be a range, a spectrum within which buildings will fall, depending on a variety of factors, including age, condition, location, things like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, any questions?
No, thank you.
Richard?
Maybe a couple here. One of the photos shows a laminate flooring in a bedroom. That's an upgrade, in my view, over a 1974 building. Do you know how much of the building has had renovation of that nature? Let me first, were you in the building?
I have not inspected any of the properties on the docket.
Thank you for that. So my question back to that, if you look at your photo, it looks like a laminate flooring, a fairly recent installation, not a 1974 installation.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know how much of the flooring has been done or if that is in all of the suites. Typically, when you you kind of look at it as a whole, you look at the kitchen, you look at the floor coverings and other rooms, it doesn't look like it's something that they've applied to every room. So
I know.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't use the floor as a reason to perhaps bump the effective age. I think we're good at leaving it at 1974 on this one.
Okay. I look at your, I think it's page 4, your rent comparables.
Yeah.
And you only have one property based on gross floor area at 115,000 that comes close to this property. The other 3 are considerably smaller. Does the rent in those smaller units, in your mind, differ based on size? Is there a scaling up or a scaling down of rent based on size of building or number of suites?
Well, I mean, in terms of the gross floor area, that encapsulates basically the entire area of the building divided by how many units there are. It also includes common areas, how big the lobby is, the hallways, if there is some kind of small multi-purpose room, how big the janitor's room is. It's not like this is how big the average suite is kind of thing. Typically, all else being the same, the larger unit is going to rent for more than the smaller unit. But I didn't really put any weight into this, and especially considering that our net operating income is pretty much the same as the actuals. I didn't really put too much time into comparable rent analysis.
So the model did everything for it.
Oh, the model did the valuation, other than the deduction for the roof replacement, but I did pick the comparables.
Thank you. No other questions.
And I have no questions. So Mark, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, so the primary issue here is one of capitalization rate. And I think the picture in this regard will become clear to you at the end of the hearing of all the properties, because of course we have a spectrum of properties, and the question is, where does each one fit into that spectrum? And that's why I asked the questions of the assessor I did. What are the most important criteria? Is it age? Is it size? The assessor says, I don't really know, it's the model that does this, and I'm not the modeler, but age and size will be important, neighborhood will be important, location. And again, I say to you that I think the full picture on this will become clearer at the end of today's hearing, because at the end of the day, it's a comparative process and a ranking in many ways of the different properties. So there was no challenge on my part to the rent. There was an issue about the expense ratio, but the assessor and I have talked that through, and I'm ultimately okay with the model net operating income. So really all you're left with is the capitalization rate plus the roof repair issue. The assessor's recognizing the roof repair issue. There's a full report in here about that. There are some things in this report that I put in all my reports. I'm going to speak to you about them one time, draw them to your attention, and ask that you consider them in the context of all the properties you deal with for efficiency of time. So again, the roof report really isn't an issue. The question is really the capitalization rate. And so if you go to page 4 of my brief, there we see a chart, which is a comparison between Q1 2018, Q1 2021 of the range of capitalization rates being reported by the various brokerage firms. We see in terms of the low rise in Colliers, and remember with Colliers, there's always this issue about their methodology where they include the closing costs, including land transfer tax, as part of their purchase price. And so the effect of that is essentially to understate the capitalization rate. And representatives of Colliers, both in a municipal board hearing, but also before panels of this board, have been quite clear that that's done as a marketing tool by the brokerage side of Colliers, because of course, if potential sellers who are going to list their properties believe they can get a higher price because there's a lower cap rate, they're more attracted to provide a listing, and they get the business. And effectively, it's about a 25 basis point difference between Colliers because of that methodology and the others. But having said that, you can see that Colliers had a range of 5 to 6% in Q1 of 21 for low rise. CBRE made a distinction between low rise A and low rise B, and the range is 5.5 to 6 based on a low rise B. Cushman was at 5 to 5.75 on the low rise. And again, you're going to hear me make reference to this as we go through other of the properties, because these are generally low rise properties. They are older. So again, I'm going to ask you to keep all this in mind as we go along. So you always have to look at the building. You have to look at where do they fall into the spectrum of buildings. If you look at my page 5, I have a heading categorization of buildings, type of construction. Does it have a heritage designation? Not an issue here. Amenities in the building. Do they have in-suite laundry? Do they have a party room? Do they have meeting space? This subject building, and indeed most of the buildings, but not all, have none of these amenities because they're older. And they didn't create amenities like that back in the 70s or 60s or 50s when these buildings were built. Age of the building, the older it gets, the riskier it becomes, because of course they start to wear out. Roofs have to get redone periodically. And I agree that, God and climate change willing, every 20 years you can get away with having to do a roof, and not more often. I'm not sure that's the case anymore, but that used to be certainly the thought. Condition of the property, does it need a new roof? This one does. Does it need a new parking lot? They will. Do they need new mechanical systems? What's the blend of unit types? Bachelors, 1s and 2s. So this one has got 93 1s and 47 2s. In terms of a mix, that's not optimum, because of course with 2 bedrooms, you can generate more revenue because the rent structure will be higher. What's the size of the property, and what's going on in terms of new construction. So I'm on to page 6 of my brief. This is a dated building built in 1974. It's got a low proportion of 2-bedroom units. Approximately 1/3 of the units are low. I'm aware that Altus has done a cap rate study, and in their mind, properties in the 1960 to 1998 range, low rise, 1 to 5 stories, are in the 5.5% range. But again, it's a question of the spectrum and the quality and the specific building. Page 7, I give you some statistics about the increase in the number of apartment units in the city of Winnipeg. All you need to do is drive around. Everywhere you go, people are building apartment buildings. I don't know where they think the occupants are going to come from. But you know, in many ways, immigration drives the economy, it drives the construction. Vacancies have gone up, we see that. So ultimately, I was asking for a value of $14,026,000, and I'll explain that in a moment. So let me just turn the pages. So page 8 was the original assessment. Page 10 was my calculation of value. You'll see that I use the assessor's gross potential income and 3.2% cap. I was increasing the expense ratio somewhat. That drove an NOI of 806. The assessors come back to me and pointed out that there are some other revenue sources on the site. And that's why I'm saying at the end of the day, we don't really have an issue with the NOI. I'm accepting of the model NOI. So we do have a cap rate issue though remaining, and I'll come back to that. Page 11, 12, and 13, these are Cmhc statistics. And what I'm really wanting to have you understand, and if you go to page 13 is the summary of all the data that appears on 11 and 12. And what you will see from that is that 2005 construction, or construction since 2005, because there's been a lot of it, but only since 2014 have they tracked the differences. And you can see that in the last 6 years or so, we've had 11,393 new apartment units in the city of Winnipeg, a 21% increase over what the number of units was in 2014. And you can see the split between 1s and 2s. You can see that the split is pretty close. People are building a lot more 2-bedroom units. They're building them frequently with 2 washrooms as well, because that's what the demand is. They're building them with amenities. They've got party rooms. They've got gyms. They've got a lot more things happening in them. And the point of all this is simply that as your building ages out, and as you don't have these things, you become less competitive in the apartment marketplace, and the risk of the maintenance of your value increases, I would suggest. The last item is the roof report. And again, there's no dispute about that. The assessor is accepting of that. And that's why the assessor was making the adjustment the assessor was making. So what I come back to is in 2020, this building had a cap rate of 5.6%. Depending on the chart, the cap rates you look at, you see a low of 5.5, for example, from CBRE for low-rise B buildings. My suggestion is the capitalization rate should come up to 5.75%. So accepting the assessor's NOI with a 5.75% capitalization rate, give me. Would give us a value of $14,517,000. So again, I come back to the real issue here is the capitalization rate. and I'm asking for 5.75. And again, I think the picture of
That number, yeah.
$14,517,460.
That's when you use the 5.75.
That's correct, with the assessor's NOI. And subject to questions, that's my submission.
Matthew, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. I'll focus mostly on the cap rate on this property. So on page 4, you've got some ranges for Collier's CBRE. And Cushman, it shows from 18 to 21. Collier's was the same. CBRE, low-rise A, the range dropped for 2021. For low-rise B, the bottom end dropped. And for Cushman, it stayed the same. Ignoring the high-rise side of it, would you not agree that this indicates that the market has improved from 2018 to 2021?
So again, what is being reported through these reports is a spectrum of properties, of course. And that's why I say at the end of the day, it's important to understand where in that spectrum a specific property falls. And that's so yes, some of the brokers will tell you there's been no change between 18 and 21. Some of the brokers will tell you for certain properties, there's been a slight change at either the low end or the high end. But my response to that simply, as I've said, is it's important to see where the building falls within the spectrum. And you know my views on where this one falls.
Okay. All right. And so in regards to just the Altus chart on page 6, did you review the Altus cap rate study, including the sales that they used?
I have,
yes. You have? Okay. So you're aware that they only have 4 sales that they're using on a site-specific basis?
Yes.
You're aware that one of the sales transacted after the reference date?
I don't recall that, but I don't dispute that if that's what you're saying.
Okay. And then the other 3 sales, are you aware that the city of Winnipeg disputes the calculation of cap rate on that?
Talking about 2390 McPhillips, yes, I'm aware that there's disagreement between the parties.
Oh, I mean the other 3 sales, that one's not in their study. The ones that are in their study, they're actually on my list as well.
Okay.
The last 3 on the list. Are you aware that we don't agree with how they've stabilized? Maybe I'll just leave it at that. Okay, and then so in terms of selection of cap rate, did you consider the year-over-year lower than market vacancy the property has been having when selecting your cap rate?
I did have it in mind, yes.
Okay, so would you view a property that has lower than market vacancy, perhaps a vendor would consider lowering the cap rate on their sale, their offer to reflect that?
So, participants in the real estate market often buy properties for one or two reasons, or both. They buy it for yield because they want to get a return on their investment. And secondly, they buy it for the hope of future appreciation. The problem with a market that is seeing a huge influx of additional units is, in my view, the risk of future appreciation increases, especially when you've got a dated age building that, from an amenity perspective, is not keeping up with the market. So one of the reasons why buildings like this will sometimes have a lower vacancy at points in time is their rent structure is lower because they're dated. So there's a relationship between all that, of course, and a lot of renters in some ways are being priced out of parts of the market because of all the new construction and the cost of construction and the higher rents that have to be achieved by by the owners of that new development. So yes, I have in mind the vacancy factor in this property, but again, it fits into the entire picture.
Okay. Now that the roof has been accounted for, essentially it's like a new roof on there. In my evaluation, would you consider that in capitalization rate determination?
So, and you know, the issue here is, and it's actually referenced in the roof report. There's 4 buildings on this site. It's not like a single building where, you know, you do the roof and you're done. You're going to have a cycle of roofs that need to be done on 4 different buildings here. And you've actually brought to mind another point that will arise on another property to be dealt with. When you've got multiple buildings, you've got multiple sets of infrastructure, multiple heating systems, boilers, parking lots. So there's a size benefit that comes with it, but there's also an infrastructure cost. And again, as the building is older, that cost becomes more significant. And so, in my view, an investor does have to take into account not the roof that you're now allowing for, but the next 3 roofs that might need to be done in 5 years and 8 years and 12 years as we go forward.
Okay. And just one more question. Would this property, in your mind, be a good candidate for renovation?
So the problem with the renovation market is not the theory. And you know, when we go back 10 years, renovations were the rage. Everybody was doing it because you could get a big increase in rents, and the market would tolerate it. The market won't tolerate the big increase in rents. Plus, the rent control system has cracked down on this and made it more difficult, because what was happening is tenants were getting priced out of their units. They couldn't afford to stay in those units because the rents were getting bumped up. And so the rent regulation people made it more difficult to do renovations, and the cost of construction has skyrocketed. You can't get $1,400 or $1,500 or $1,600 per month for buildings like this with no amenities, which is what you're going to have to get for today's cost of construction.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Robert, any questions?
No, not at all. This is quite informative. Thank you.
Richard?
1, your Altus study on page 6, not your Altus study, the Altus study you presented, indicates 1960 to 98, 5.5%.
Yeah.
You may have mentioned this, why you use 5.75 instead of that 5.5.
Right.
I'm
So-
sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, and so I think I did mention it, but maybe not very specifically in the context that you just asked. So again, you're going to have a spectrum of properties, and in my view, this one, because of its age, because of its size, because of the multiple buildings, it's going to fall a little bit higher in the range. The 5.6 from 2020, in my view, that ought not to be coming down because the building is aging out, and that's why I used 5.75.
Thank you. No further questions.
And also the assessor did use that.
Sorry,
The assessor used that.
I know Mr. Newman used 5.75.
I don't think we should be discussing that.
I'm sorry. Oh,
Thank you. And I have no questions.
And again, I just want to say, much of what I've said here is going to apply to some of the other properties, so I'm going to be abbreviated with it.
And agreed. Carry forward. Okay. The next property on the docket is 161 Quail Rouge Road. Let's get to it. Any preliminary issues on this one? Yeah.
No.
And let me just get to it. Okay, Matt, you can start with your presentation.
Okay, just let me pull it up quick. Doing some quick review here. Okay. File 22-2090, roll number 07438109200161 Quail Rouge Road. 2023 assessment, assessed value 9.439 million. It's an apartment building. It's got 9 buildings, 2 to 4 story on record, 1977. Effective year built 1977. Again, like the last property, hasn't had any sort of level of work that would necessitate an effective age. 72 suites, 77 outdoor parking spots, construction class D wood or steel frame walls. I've made a recommendation on this property. I'm going to, again, modify it slightly. There's the same issue with this property where there's impending large roof repair that instead of, I believe it should be reflected in a lump sum discount rather than a cap rate adjustment. So my new recommendation is 8,662,000. That is to reflect 135,000 worth of roof repair that needs to be done. I believe it's on 3 buildings. My workup is on page 7. I didn't put that in my recommendation, but if you go to my page 7, you can see how I came to the market valuation of the property prior to deducting the 135,000. So essentially, what I looked at was 3 years of income and expense mailer. You can see that in 19 and 18, they spent a heck of a lot on repair and maintenance on the property. So I didn't put weight on those years. What I did is I just looked at the net operating income that the 2020 income and expenses reported, and then I used simply the modeled 5.2 cap on it. And then after talking with the applicant ahead of time, looking at their workup, I thought it necessary to make a lump sum adjustment for the pending roof that needs to be done. That I'll just pause there and let the applicant address that.
So again, it's the same issue. So the NOI is not an issue here. The 457,464 that the assessor is showing on his page 7 is going to work. The adjustment to the roof is going to work. The question is the capitalization rate, and you'll hear much of the same presentation you heard on the last one.
Okay, sounds good. And again, I'll try and be brief and speed this along and only point out any sort of differences there are. So page 2, you can see again, they're very compliant in handing in mailers and there's no recent sales. Page 3 shows the modeled valuation, which I've gone away from, but it shows the breakdown. It's got 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom units. Pardon me. 72 units total. 5.2 cap as per the model. Rent comparables, again, in the area show that we're within the range. But again, I use the actuals and net operating income isn't in dispute, so I'm going to speed along here. Cap rate evidence on page 5. My examples just went over these. I'll push forward. In that regard, page 7 was my site-specific analysis. Page 8 is the municipal act excerpts. Page 9 through 10, I included the 2020 and 2019 income and expense mailers. I forgot to put in the 2018 income and expense mailer. Same as the last property, the 3-year average vacancy is 1.69. The modeled vacancy is 3.2. So it looks like Rouge Road, there's good demand for this property, better than market demand, good tenancy strength that would give an investor confidence in a vendor, perhaps some leverage in when they negotiate cap rate, in my opinion. So then we have pictures after page 11. onwards, 14 shows the inside. It's, again, it looks like it's had some flooring done, but then you look at the kitchen on page 12, very basic. So it looks like they've done some stuff, and then some other photos show very basic nature. So again, no effective age on this property. That's gonna be maybe pushing a cap rate one way or another in our model. So 5.2 is our cap rate. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, any questions?
Yes. So as you've noted, this building is 1977, built with an effective age of 1977. So again, no real improvements. It's in the St. James area. So we have Rouge with a 5.4 cap rate. We have this one with a 5.2 cap rate. They seem to be essentially the same age. Any idea why?
I don't know why. This one's I guess a little bit newer, but other than that, I can't really determine much more of a difference than that.
And as you've noted, 9 buildings. So again, you have 9 sets of infrastructure in the sense of heating system and roofs, and and as you've noted by the adjustment in terms of the roof, there's 3 buildings with roofs left to be done, but of course that's cycle again, whether it's 5 or 8 or 12 years, but that'll recycle again, correct?
Yes. There's a few, from my understanding, the other 6 roofs, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, have already been replaced. So 3 remain as far as I know.
Yeah. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, any questions?
No, not right now. We don't.
Richard?
I have none, thanks.
And I have none. So Mark, you can start your presentation.
Okay, so let me jump again right to the capitalization rate, because that's really the issue here. So 9 buildings, 1977. And just to be clear, I've been to these properties. I've been to all of them. I've been through this property with the property manager. It's a low-rise building, obviously. Just let me address the flooring issue for a moment. So absolutely, more and more you see in new buildings, you see in older buildings that as carpets wear out and as they replace flooring, they replace with laminate. They do it for 2 reasons. One, it's easier to clean. So when people spill, as they always do, and dogs pee on carpets, as they frequently do, if pets are allowed in the building, it's easier to clean that up and you don't have to replace the carpet. Secondly, if you can find the same color and type of laminate material, if something gets burned, for example, you can sometimes get a panel, a tile out and replace it. So for a variety of reasons, the trend is away from the carpet and to the laminate flooring for the reasons I've articulated. Like the assessor, I agree, that's not an upgrade, that's just a change because our world has changed and our technology has changed. And that's the rage these days. In 5 years or 10 years, people may want to go back to soft surface as opposed to the hard surface. So that's my comment on the flooring issue. So again, this is an older building, obviously. It's multiple buildings on site. I don't really understand why the cap rate is 5.2% here. We'll come to talk about a 1959 building in a few minutes where the cap rate is 5.3%. So I don't fully understand the model, but in my view, the number of buildings here, the age here, all of that should trend us to a higher capitalization rate and not a lower rate, for example, than Rouge. So at the end of the day, and again, we can go back to the charts and, we looked at the charts and, the CBRE low-rise B, 5.5 to 6, the Colliers 5 to 6 on low-rise, remembering the adjustment that I suggest is necessary for their methodology. So you look at all that and you look at the age of this building and the dated condition. And so I say the cap rate needs to be higher. And so what I did ultimately is I selected 5.5%, 5.75% capitalization rate. But I'm now accepting of the assessor's NOI. So I'm going to give you some numbers that are a little bit different than what's in my brief. So I ask that you take this down. So the assessor's NOI for purposes of the recommendation is $457,464.
Okay, Senator, what's that number again?
457,464. That's the assessor's NOI, which I'm accepting. If you apply a 5.75 cap rate to that, you'll get $7,955,895
$955.
to be precise. And if you take $135,000 off that,
185.
135 for the roof adjustment, we'll get $7,820,895.
7,821,000 rounded.
Sure. And, you know, again, really, this comes down to the capitalization rate. I don't think there's any other dispute here. And subject to questions, that's my submission.
Matthew, any questions?
Yeah, just quick on page 16. Just to confirm, of the 9 buildings, 6 of them have had their roofs replaced recently.
I
Is that
agree.
correct?
I agree.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, any questions?
Yeah, when you have all these buildings, are they actually all constructed the same?
Yes.
And the suites are the same and the numbers are the same, like between a single and a double? Or
You mean 1 and 2 bedrooms?
yeah,
Yeah.
or
I can't tell you precisely whether every building contains the exact same mix, because I don't remember that.
I was just wondering if one building got more preferable
Yeah, and maybe they were built slightly
location
differently.
or how it looks or
Yeah.
facing or whatever.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
But as a combined situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
I have no questions. Thank you.
I just have one question. Since you've been in these buildings, do they still have the original aluminum windows and aluminum patio doors?
I'm going to say.
Typically, that was built in that era.
Yeah, and I'm going to say to you, I think not. I think the windows would have been replaced along the way.
Okay.
This is a reasonably diligent property manager. So I'm going to say likely it was done.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. And that concludes that property. The next one on the docket is 3590 Portage Avenue. Any preliminary issues?
No.
Okay. Matthew, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. File 22-3119, roll number 075690267000. 3590 Portage Avenue, original assessed value $18,341,000. I've made a recommendation to reduce the assessment to $9,357,000. The workup is on page 9. The applicant and I have discussed this ahead of time. It's to my understanding that he's agreeable with the recommendation.
Mark, are you agreeable?
I am, but I do want to address it just for a moment.
Okay, let's let Matthew read it into the record.
Sure.
Okay, so I have a recommendation to reduce the assessment to $9,357,000, page 9. That would be my analysis on it. So you can see, or rather maybe start with page 8. They've been doing, you can see on a per unit basis, there's been a bunch of work that's been done. So when stabilizing, typically when you see R&M around 5,000 per unit, there's probably capital repairs going on. Though those capital repairs aren't appearing on a stabilized income and expense basis, there's probably there's capital work being done. And this capital work would be something that, though I don't have the details of it, would probably be like HVAC in nature, potentially some roofs, something big that would be done. However, on a yearly estimated net operating income and expense amount going forward, you don't stabilize at that amount. So what I did on page 9 is I stabilized at 1,500 per unit, which is something you typically see. That's kind of, you know, in the middle high end for a property of this vintage. I'd say it's probably just about normal, very conservative as well. So then using the 5% cap generated the 9,357 rounded on the property.
And the revised NOI, just to confirm, is
Oh, that is okay. So that's on my page 9. That's 4,67845 and 95 cents.
in a 5% cap.
Yeah, and then you can see the how it rounds out from there, and how it compares to last. I know you're not supposed to look at past assessments, but it's in there if you want to look at it.
And Mark, any questions?
So, and again, just so the panel understands, going back to page 1 of your brief, this is an actual build 2005, and with 59 units with 7 stories. So, and it's a well-built building. It's a concrete building, correct?
That's what we have on record. Yes.
Okay, and the original value, page 3, was 11,341,000 using a 4.7% cap. And going back to your page 9, the revised value is 9,357,000 using a 5% cap.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to come to a value that was reasonable on the property. I think it's definitely very conservative, but in line with past agreements. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. As I indicated, the recommendation is acceptable, but I think it's important to understand context in light of everything we're doing on this docket this morning. Thank you.
Agreed. Robert, any questions of it? Richard?
None. Thank you.
And I have no questions. So the next property on the docket is 1880 Main Street. Any preliminary issues on this one?
No, just let me pull my stuff up here.
Yeah, I have to do mine as well.
Okay, if you guys are ready, I'll go ahead with this one. File number 20. Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead.
We're good. Okay, file number 22-2532, roll number 11030031000, 1880 Main Street, 2023. Again, assessed value 3,148,000. Actual year built 1959, effective year built same. The number of suites 40, outdoor parking 22, construction class C masonry bearing walls. Request for income information. They've always handed their stuff in. Page 3 is our income value summary. 40 units, 1 bachelor, 36 1 bed, 3 2 bed. See our modeled valuation with their average monthly rent 786.84. It's all modeled, 5.3% cap rate. Rent comparables are found on page 4 here. You can see that we're at the bottom end of the range, not the complete bottom, and Enniskillen is lower still, but it's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. There is a higher proportion other than comparable number 2 of 1 bedroom units compared to the comparables. When you look at the average monthly rent, we're on the lower end of the scale, so that falls in line. Cap rate evidence is on page 5 and 6. So I'll just keep this in mind. On page 3, the net operating income is 166,838. When you go to my analysis on page 8, you can see the calculated NOI. Reported NOI here is 164, 160, and 174 for the past 3 years. So at 166, we're right there. The repair and maintenance, I don't know why it's in red. There's nothing wrong with it at that range, so that's not a problem. That's why I considered it. So it looks like our NOI is right there. I believe this one is just a cap rate issue as well. I included the mailers on this property here. I wasn't able to find photos, I don't think, or else I would have put them in my brief. Well, again, another thing to note, the average 3-year vacancy, if you did the calculations on the income and expense mailer, is 1.11%. The modeled valuation is the model vacancy rate rather is 4.2%. So this is another property that's got, about a quarter of the market vacancy. So there's strong tenancy. An investor and vendor would definitely consider that. If they were stabilizing net operating income using a 4.2 cap, that strength of tenancy advantage doesn't just disappear. They would probably agree that there would be a lower risk in purchasing the property because you got strong tenants, strong tenant demand. And that would have been reflected in the cap rate if it wasn't reflected in the vacancy rate, which the city isn't really doing. So I feel very good at a 5.3 cap on this property. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, any questions?
Yes. So here we have a 1959 building. This is a 2.5-story walk up on Main Street, right next to Edmund Partridge School at the corner of Forest. So a 1959 building and a 5.3 capitalization rate. If we look at your page 5, and again, I appreciate these are not intended to be site specific, but would you agree with me that the comparable at 555 Corden is the most similar in terms of location? And by that, I mean on a main thoroughfare, Corden and Main Street. And also, relatively speaking, in terms of age, 1955 and 1959. So would you agree with me that it's the most similar?
Yeah, I mean, Bertrand at 63 and St. Mary's at 61 are also similar vintage. I know St. Mary's isn't exactly a quiet street itself. So there's definitely a spectrum of capitalization rates. This at 5.3, falls between Bertrand and Corden.
And both St. Mary's and Bertrand are 9-unit buildings, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So the scale of the investment in the property is much different than the subject.
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. Those ones sold more around the 1 million. This is around the 3 million. Those ones are below 5. We're at 5.3. I don't know what sort of tenant demand they have off the top of my head. I don't have my spreadsheets in front of me on that, but I do know that there's very strong tenant demand for this property.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Robert.
No questions.
Richard?
No questions. Thanks.
And I have no questions. So Mark, you can proceed.
So to my brief, and I'm okay with the assessor's NOI at 166 and change. My original submission has it somewhat lower. 166 and change is a couple of $1,000s higher. than the actual 164,587 reflected in his brief. But it's not a material difference. So again, we go to page 3 of my brief, and we get back to the issue of the capitalization rate. And again, I'd really like to talk to those modelers one day and understand how that black box works. And again, as I said to you at the outset, this will all become clear by the time we get to the end of the process. But here's a building, 1959, you know, in relative terms, it's a smaller building, doesn't have a lot of 2 bedrooms, and yet it's getting a higher capitalization rate than a 1977 property with a much higher proportion of 2-bedroom units. I don't get it, but I come back to the fact that this is an older building. It's dated in all respects. It doesn't have amenities that modern buildings have. You look at the charts from the brokers. This is clearly a B-class building in terms of its quality. And so ultimately, and consistently with what I did in my valuations, I applied for these older buildings a 5.75% capitalization rate. I did that here as well. So if you take the assessor's NOI of 166,838 and apply the 5% capitalization rate, we get a value of 2,901,530 compared to the assessor's 3,148,000. It's not a huge difference, but you know, it's I guess it's about $250,000 by the time we're all said and done. But subject to questions, that's my submission.
So that value is rounded to 2,902,000.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Robert, any questions?
No.
Richard.
No, thank you.
Assessor.
Oh, sorry, Matt. We're going so quickly. I'm not used to this.
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So that concludes 1880 Main. The next one on the docket is 99 Dalhousie. Any preliminary issues?
No.
Nope. Okay, Matthew, you can proceed.
Okay, thanks. Okay, file 22-2559, roll number 030437805000, 99 Dalhousie Drive, assessed value, 23,933,000, 1972, effective year built 1972. I got a rec on this property. I changed the 20T assessment on it to 21,021,000. The applicant and I have discussed this ahead of time. It's my understanding that it is acceptable. I'll just pause there for that confirmation.
And what, just to clarify, why the reduction?
Okay, so page 9 is, well, sorry, page 8. I did the same thing. What I did is I looked at the actual income and expenses on the property on a 3-year basis, and then on page 9 I did a recommendation calculation. What I did, you can see that their management was really high. Typically management is 5% of effective gross income, so I changed that to 5% of the effective 2020 reported income, and I used their support. And I use a 3-year average for repair and maintenance instead of just the 2020, because that's a better way of reflecting and estimating. That's what the vendor and purchaser would do. And then I just use the remainder of the 2020 figures to try and see where the site-specific NOI would be in comparison to the model. The calculated NOI was 1,177,000. The model NOI was 1,319,000. That's a significant difference, enough in my mind definitely to warrant a recommendation using the 5.6 cap. Modeled cap dropped the 20T portion of the assessment to the value there, indicated at 21 $4,021,000. And there's no change to the tax exempt 40 institutional property classification at 372. I understand this is not contested.
So just to clarify, 372 for the class code 40
Yeah,
and 21,021,000 for the class code 20.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the total becomes
Oh, sorry. Let me add that up for you. 372.
21,392.
21,392.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is that what we're having?
Yeah,
The
21 total 392.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Mark, how do you feel?
So the recommendation is fine. Again, I'll just point out that this is 1972 era with a 5.6 cap. And I'll deal with that at the end of the day. I want to see that black box that the modelers have.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes 99 Dalhousie. The next one on the docket is 65 Paget Street, and just let us get there. And Matthew, you can proceed. No preliminary issues, I assume, gentlemen?
No. Okay, so let me do a quick glance here. Property. Okay, I'm good to go. File number 22-2074, roll number 10006421600 65 Paget Street. Roll year 2023, assessed value 12,681,000. Actual year built 2008, no effective year built on it. 62 suites, 62 indoor parking, 19 outdoor parking on this one. No recommendation, request for income information on page 2. They've been good handing their stuff in. There's an old sale. I believe this is not reflective of the improvement in 2008. I believe it's probably a vacant land sale. I didn't research it or put any weight on it. Page 3 shows our income value summary as per the model. 62 2-bedroom with an average monthly rent of $1,494.46. The rest of the parameters are modeled. 4.65 modeled capitalization rate generates our market value of 12,681. So we got our rent comparables on page 4. You can see that we fall with it slightly below the range for these newer properties. These other ones also have 1-bedrooms. The subject does not. Gross floor area per unit is higher, but again, that can be skewed by the size of multi-purpose rooms or gyms or other amenities. So it's not an indication of the average unit size at all. We're at the bottom of the range, so I didn't see any reason to change. The model rent cap rates on 5 and 6. And then, so shouldn't say recommendation here because I didn't actually make one. So this is just a subject income and expense analysis on page 7. So again, I reviewed the income and expenses on the property. It looks like they've done a bunch of repairs and maintenance. They reported a bunch of repairs and maintenance and per unit in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. So when I looked at their actuals at the bottom of page 7, I did a workup using a more reasonable, very reasonable for this age of property actually, especially when it's undergone a whole ton of repairs on it in the past 3 years of $1,500 per unit. And then use the 5% of effective gross income management because in this case, they're reporting management low. So I did increase the management up to 5% at 57,686. And then I just used the 2020 parameters from there on in, calculated a value of $12,735,070.75, higher than the model assessment I don't believe this is an instance where the net operating income is actually disputed either, but so I'm not gonna dwell too much on that. One thing I will try to direct the panel's attention to is on this page 7, when you look at the repairs and maintenance that they are reporting, the past 3 years, it's been between $6,000 and $7,000. Like, again, like that doesn't appear in the expenses, but I don't have details of the work. They didn't provide a breakdown of the repair and maintenance, but that work is somewhere done in that property, adding value to the property, either repairing items that have worn out or updating items. HVAC, roof, I'm not sure. They didn't provide details, but it looks like it's well taken care of. So that's something that I would keep in mind when trying to judge the validity of a cap rate. So again, net operating income looks good. Modeled cap, they've done a bunch of work there. I just don't know exactly what it is. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, any questions?
So, this property is very similar to 3590 Portage, isn't it?
Well, it's in a different area, definitely. So I wouldn't say that. It's got a similar, if my memory serves, year built.
So let me rephrase the question. Size of the building, very similar to 3590 Portage? 59 as opposed to 62 units?
Yeah, I'll pull it up, but yeah, I won't dispute that. So yeah, so it's the 2005 to 2008, 62 suites, 59 suites. This one is on Portage, 65 Paget, I believe that's in the south. So they're in a different area, and area is something that is a factor.
Okay. But leaving aside area in terms of type of construction, size, age of construction, all very similar. Agreed?
Physically, yes. I would say that I haven't inspected these properties. Unfortunately, I haven't had time. But just on looking at the property inventory, yeah, I would agree with that statement.
And the model NOI is $589,683. You went back in and on page 7, you essentially stabilized the R&M, correct?
Yeah, and I also boosted the management a bit too.
Right. And that brought you to 592, which is very similar to the model of 589,683.
That is correct.
And if we then look at your page 9, so page 9 is the income and expense statement for 2020.
Yep.
And that was the source of the information which you used to make the adjustments that are reflected at the bottom of page, well, throughout page 7, correct?
That, and for the R&M, I use the 18 and 19 mailers.
Okay. And I don't want to belabor this, but you had the opportunity of looking at my brief. And you know that as part of the total expenses that were reported, they were including depreciation, and that we have pulled that out, correct?
Let me see.
If you're not familiar with it, that's okay. I'll pass that by and I'll get to it in my evidence.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I'll get to it in my evidence.
Okay.
The other observation I would make is look at page 9. You see that one of the revenue items is an item called cable internet recovery.
Yes.
$5,362. And you understand that to be the fact that the building is recovering from the tenants, the cost of cable and internet?
I'm not sure exactly. I know they have an expensive cable and satellite TV. I do know something that it's recovered year over year, at roughly the same level. For 19, it was 59,000. And for 18, it was 55,000. So I believe it's something that would be considered on the bottom line.
Right. And then if you look at page 9, there's ledger account numbers in the left-hand column. If you look under utilities maintenance, line 7005, you see cable satellite TV,
Mm-hmm.
and you see $31,080.
Yeah.
You don't see $65,362.
No, I do not.
And I don't imagine you would have any explanation for that discrepancy, in fairness.
No, I don't know why, but looking at previous years, 59,000 cable internet, and then they're only reporting for 19, the same thing. So they're not reporting the entire thing. They seem to be getting some income on top of that. I don't know how those two are tied together.
I understand that, and I didn't expect you to, in fairness. I just wanted to address the issue with you. So now turning to the capitalization rate. If we look at your brief again, if we look at your page 6, the charts. So this property is put at 4.65, which is below the 20th percentile for high-rise buildings, correct?
Yes.
Any idea why?
Well, the model selected the cap rate, and I mean area. Pardon me, definitely comes into play. You know, like I mentioned, I think it was the first property. If you have two properties that are exactly the same, and one's in not a good area, and one's in the south where it's a little bit, well, it's a lot nicer. It's going to garner a lower cap rate. So I think the area that it's in is very good. But again, it's done by the model. I didn't select it, so that's about as far as I can tell you.
Fair enough. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
No questions.
And Richard.
Just one. Matthew, I don't see a map in your evidence, an overhead view. Show a ratio of 8.889. And I know on occasion you've used 4 as a threshold for extra land value. Is this configured for extra land value or not?
No, there's no valuation for extra land on it. When looking at I'm just pulling up a picture now.
Mr. Witt, you'll see in my brief an overhead, which I think will make that clear.
There's no room to build anything extra. There's no extra value there.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt.
And that's it?
Yep.
Matthew, I just have one question. You had mentioned the building was well taken care of. Did you inspect it?
I did not inspect it, but I'm looking at just the amount of repair and maintenance they put into the property on a per unit basis is many times more than what's typical for a building of that age. So it looks like whoever's in charge of doing the maintenance on the property is up on it. That's how I got the determination, strictly looking at the R&M.
No, that's a fair comment. Thank you very much. And that's my last question. Mark, do you want to present your evidence?
So a little bit more of an extensive presentation on this one. So let's go to page 2 of my brief. The 2020 assessment on this property was $9,999,999. Okay. So we're looking at 12.681. That's a 26.81% increase. The capitalization rate proposed by the assessor for 2020 was 5%. We're now down to 4.65%. I'll just note at this point that the capitalization rate on 3590 Portage is 5%. And yes, I agree, there is a difference in location. The Portage Avenue location, however, is well set back from Portage. And yes, one is out on the west part of the city and one is in the south part of the city. But I don't understand the difference in the cap rate between the two. So I told you about the expenses and depreciation, or I asked the question of the assessor. I'll show it to you. You can see my comments on page 3, but I'll show it to you on the attached income and expense statements. The visual, I think, will be better for you. But what I'm telling you is that in the total expenses, there is approximately $250,000 of depreciation, which I was pulling out to get to an adjusted expenses, which I was then using to address the expense ratio. I'll show it to you visually and we'll come back to that. So then on page 4, you've got, or one other comment I'll make to you, and this again tied to the expense ratio at the bottom of page 3 and on to page 4. This is an expensive building to operate. It's got 2 elevators. It's got underground parking. The utilities are included in the rent, except for cable, which is the subject of recovery, which I'll address further in a moment. But it's also electrically heated. It's more expensive electric heat, and I'll show you some material from Manitoba Hydro in that regard. So then in terms of cap rates, so this is a high-rise building. Colliers is showing 5 to 6%. Again, remember the Colliers methodology. CBRE is at 5% to 5.5%. Cushman at 4.5 to 5.5. This is a nice building. I'm not going to suggest to you otherwise. You know, it's a well-built building. It's a concrete building. It's got underground parking. It's got all of those things. The Altus cap rate information on page 6, 1999 plus 5.25%. The increase in number of apartment units, I spoke to you about those statistics earlier. I'll come back to that when I turn the pages. Access to the property, I'm going to show you an overhead photo to address the access issue, and then I'll come back to the issue of value ultimately. So let's look at page 9. Page 9 is the overhead photo, and you can see the property boundaries. So you can see Paget, which is off Sterling Lyon, to help you with location. You can see that to get into this property, approximately mid-photo, there's a road that comes off the public street. But this road is a private drive, essentially. It's not a public street. And that means the owner is responsible to maintain it. That means the owner is responsible to repair it. That means the owner is responsible to clear the snow on it, all of which is fine. But they don't own the whole road. It's not a private drive. It's a shared drive, not with an adjacent building, but with 2 adjacent buildings. And you can see that, and I'll split the photo in half running up and down. So you can see on the right-hand side of the photo, there's a boundary line running north-south down the middle of the page. That's a development on the east side of the site. North is up. That's a development on the east side of the site. And then in what is the southwest corner of the site, there is another development, and the subject property is in the northwest corner of the site. All 3 of those sites share this common roadway. And shared roadways can sometimes be a recipe for trouble, not always, maybe not even often. But the point I'm making is that unlike all other properties we deal with, There's a different risk element, I will suggest, by virtue of the fact that they don't have direct access to their property, but rather they have a shared access only. But that's the overhead photo. And again, Mr. Whitbread, to your question about the excess land, I think as you can see, the way the building is situated on the site, there is no opportunity for other development. Okay, so page 11 was my workup, which used a 5.25% cap rate and brought the value to $9,936,000. I will come back to that in a moment. I want to show you some additional attachments first. Page 12, and I mentioned earlier, I would show you visually the removal of the depreciation. So what you see here is the totaling of all the expenses, the $89,000 for general administration, the $584,000 for utilities maintenance, and the other expenses of $139,000. Those collectively total $813,000. And were you to go back to the assessor's page 7, you'd see in his analysis of the year by year by year, $813,627. I asked the assessor the question, and in fairness, I didn't expect he would necessarily know the answer. But my point is, within the repair and maintenance of $371,000 is actually $254,000 of depreciation. And when you take that out, the repair and maintenance comes down to $117,000, which means it's under $2,000 a door, which means it's coming back into the appropriate place it should be, I'll suggest, considering the nature of the building, elevators, underground parking, those types of things. And I've shown you that, frankly, if you look at page 14, you can actually see at the bottom of that page the depreciation line of $254,000. So again, I just wanted it to be understood because I needed to look at the expense ratio. When I saw 371, it struck me, boy, they're spending a lot of money here. What's going on? So I dug into this some more, and through the property manager, I got this additional information. If you come back to page 13, you see the 371,744 and the subtraction of the 254, which brings us down to 116,989. Again, $117,000 round numbers. Okay, let me keep going in terms of the attachments. Page 18, I did the same thing again. I took off the 254,000. Did I say 17? I meant 18. Page 18. Hopefully. Yeah.
There.
So I took off the 254,000 of depreciation. That brings the expenses down to 544. And then you can see on page 19, the expenses really become 105,699. And page 20 is the detailed listing. And so again, you can see what the depreciation is in that regard. So, and then there was the income statement for 2018 as well. We can pass that by. Page 26 is some information from Manitoba Hydro about the cost of electricity as opposed to natural gas for heating an average single family residence. And again, and you can see in the middle, electricity, $1,451, natural gas, $935 using a conventional furnace, and with a mid efficiency, $743, with a high efficiency, $668. The only point I was wanting to make through all this was it's a more expensive building to operate because it's electric heat. That's the only point I was wanting to make through all this. So where does that leave us with this property at the end of the day? So what the assessor has done, the assessor's model NOI was $589,683. The assessor, in addressing this with me, has raised with me other types of revenue. I'm prepared to accept the 589,683, which is the model NOI, but I have an issue with capitalization rate. And what we know, again, we've been hearing all about cap rate and the spectrum of cap rates. And we know that the 2020 value was proposed at a cap rate of 5% by the assessor. We know we've just dealt with 3590 Portage at a 5% cap rate. And yes, I understand there's a difference in location. I'm going to suggest the difference in location is likely accounted for in the rents as opposed to in the cap rate. But what I'm looking for, and remembering that the 2020 value on this property was $1 under $10 million, we're now proposed at $12,681,000. And I'm suggesting to you the capitalization rate has to come up. And I had selected a 5.25% capitalization rate. And at the assessor's model NOI, and again, you don't see this in my workup, so I'm asking you to take down the number using the 589,683 at a 5.25% capitalization rate. That becomes $11,232,000. So that's my ask, and thank you.
So what is the total your assessment?
My proposed assessment is $11,232,000.
Matthew, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple on page 6. So just to confirm, you are using a 5.25 cap rate for your valuation?
Correct.
Okay, so that's the same cap rate as Altus is using for their 99 plus. Is this where you put the weight of your determination on?
No, that's not where the weight of it comes from. So from my perspective, it's a couple of things. The 2020 cap rate was 5%. We now know, and we didn't at the time, that 3590 is getting resolved based on 5%. But also, the issue here is the risk of the shared drive, which I think cannot be ignored. So it's the combination of things that is leading to the 5.25%.
Okay. Because I'm just looking on your page 4, it looks like that for Cushman and Collier's, the bottom end of their 2021 is at 5%. You didn't feel that 5%, given that this is a nice property, it's in a nice area just north of Linden Woods. You didn't feel it would deserve a 5%?
Again, so the only thing, two things about Colliers, or one thing about Colliers, is their methodology and the fact that their cap rates, in my view, are understated by about 25 basis points. But additionally as well, again, there's always a spectrum, and I readily acknowledge it's a good building, it's a nice building. I acknowledge all of that, but I also factored in the access issue into my consideration.
Okay. Have you seen any studies where there's been a statistical correlation between shared access to higher cap rates, or any sort of case you can think offhand where it's been a real dispute?
So I've not seen a study in a real estate valuation perspective. What I have seen and have been involved with in my practice as a lawyer is disputes between parties all the time about access to properties and easement related issues. So it does arise regrettably with some frequency.
Okay, so just, so that, looking at your page 9, there is, that's the up top picture, overhead picture. So the shared drive you're talking about is, that we're talking about is in between the property to the south of it and the property itself. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so could they not, if an issue arises, could they just not get access off Stubble Street? Could they not poke a drive in there and then that would be an easy fix?
Maybe in theory, of course, you have to get curb cut approval from the city. The way the property is configured, the access to the underground parking is at the southeast corner of the building. And I'm not going to say to you that it's insurmountable to reconfigure and cause that to happen off Scoville. But there are some uncertainties there in terms of getting approval from the city for a curb cut at that point.
Okay, and then just, sorry, I'm flipping around. Just going back to page 6, I don't want to belabor this. I've just looked at Altus cap rate study, a whole bunch. To your knowledge, do they have any stabilized sales in the 1990 plus category? 1999 plus, rather, pardon me?
I'm uncertain.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
No questions.
Richard.
Yes. You talked about hydro as being expensive.
Yeah.
Mr. Newman, and the question, I may have missed this information. Do the tenants pay hydro on their own suites?
No.
So that is, the entire building is covered by the landlord.
Yes, it's an operating cost. And that's why the expenses are high here.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. No further questions.
Thank you. I just have one question regarding the shared roadway. If I go back to your map. Page 9. Page 9. Yes. Or your overhead. So who is responsible for snow clearing and maintaining this road? Is it shared between the subject property and the property to the, I guess it's south?
Well, you see, it's actually interesting because if you look at the roadway, there's almost 3 sections to the roadway. So there's a long, I'm going to call it a stick, the long stick that runs along the roadway. That's owned by the property on the east half of the site. There's
Half the roadway?
well, yeah,
Well, that's the way this is illustrated, right?
yeah. And this photo, just so we understand, is off the city of Winnipeg's aerial mapping system.
Yeah, I can appreciate.
And so, you know, approximately half the roadway, I'll call it, is owned by the subject property. The other half with certainty is owned by the property to the east. And it's a little hard to tell from the photo. There might even be some sliver of the roadway that's owned by the property that's in the southwest corner of the site.
So is there an agreement between all these properties as to maintenance?
So there is no formal written agreement, regrettably, because I asked the property manager for this, and you know, these things were developed at different points in times with different owners, and it's hopefully they get along and cooperate in the sharing of these expenses.
So how are the expenses paid? By one person and then charged to the others?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Because all of a sudden, say you got snow removal, somebody's gonna get a statement.
Yeah.
And someone's gonna pay it and then have to go after 2 other organizations.
Yeah.
Because when you get that road gives access to all 3 properties,
I agree.
because you go straight through.
Well, and quite frankly, that road at some point is going to require repairs.
Yeah.
And replacement.
Mhm. Okay, that was my only question.
Yep.
So that concludes 65 J, and I think we'll take a short 10-minute recess.
Can I just say, there's
Yes.
agreement on the next two, so decide whether you want to take the recess or not.
Okay, well, then.
Whatever you want to do is fine, but I just tell you that.
Are you accepting the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, well, then let's proceed then.
Yeah.
The next property is 1778 Pembina Highway. Any preliminary issues?
No preliminary issues. As Mr. Newman indicated, we talked a bunch about these properties, and we came to a recommendation on it. So I'll read the file in, read out the recommendation, and then we'll go from there. File number 22-2835, roll number 0308002200, 1778 Pembina Highway, owner Fort Garry Care Center Limited. We have two income streams on this property. So this property's got two sections. One of it is kind of an assisted living, independent living, and that is the residential two. And then the institutional section here, that's more of a, how shall I say? What does it say on the permit here? A supportive living housing apartment building, where there's an elevated of medical care. It's for seniors who've got higher level of medical needs that need to be cared for. The layouts of the suites are quite different. I'll touch on that when I get there. So I do have a recommendation on this property. So just to read a bit more in on this, the property is built in 2008. It's 215 suites, 30 outdoor parking spots. They've been good handing in their mailers, but we don't look at their actuals because as per assisted living, we're trying to value them like apartments. So my recommendation on this property might be a little tricky to read it in from my brief, but I'll do so. And then I'll tell you, it's basically using the applicant's figures and cap rate with a 45% expense ratio. But the recommendation for the 20T, I'll just give you the values: $11,692,504. And then the recommendation for the 40S portion is $6,621,696. So that rounds a total recommendation of $18,314,296. So $18,314,000 for this property. I'll just pause there.
Thank you. I think we have it. It's rounded 18,314,000.
Yes.
And that's based on.
So that's based on what it is. So for the 20T section, we use the modeled rents, so the model effective gross income, an expense ratio of 45%. So the expense ratio drops, but the capitalization rate goes to 5.5 on this property.
Well, the cap rate's 5.5 on the 20T.
Yes.
And on the class code 40?
Class code 40. So these are more basically the more intensive care units. They're basically like small hotel rooms. There's no kitchen or anything. 600 a unit was used on the rent. And then it's a 45% expense ratio and a 5.5 cap.
5.5 cap.
Yeah. So basically, the applicant's brief, which hasn't been presented yet, it'd be easier to have that in front of you, but just the order of operations doesn't work that way.
John, I think we can refer to his brief once.
Yeah, so we talked a bunch about this, as far as I know. I just saw the email this morning. Apparently the rec is accepted, so I'll just leave it there.
Okay, and Mark, just to confirm that you've accepted it.
I do.
Any questions of Matt?
No.
Robert, any questions? No. Richard?
I have none, thanks.
And I suppose there's no need to present your brief?
I don't think so.
Okay, then that concludes 1778 Pembina. And the last one on the docket is 311 Alexander. And any preliminary issues?
No.
Mark?
No.
Okay, thank you. You just get there. Okay, Matthew, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you. File 22-2077, roll number 13099069070, 311 Alexander. Originally the model value was 11,776,000. Originally built in 1906, effective year built 1976, 88 suites, 44 outdoor parking spots. Recommendation on this property, 9,014,000. Page 5 is my workup. So looking at this property, I did on page 5, I did a 3-year stabilized actual analysis on it. So it looks like they're having some vacancy issues with the property. So in 2020, their actual income was much lower than 2019. So I ended up just using the 2019 on it, and then I stabilized 5% effective gross income. I averaged their repair and maintenance and their waste and snow, and I used the actual utilities the right way you're supposed to stabilize. Actual taxes, 48.64 expense ratio, seems normal for a property built in originally 1906. And then the model capitalization rate comes up to my recommendation of 9,014,000. I understand this recommendation is accepted.
Mark?
That's correct.
And there's no need for Robert, any questions? No. Richard?
None.
And I have none. So that concludes our hearings today. Just let me get my. We have heard all of the items scheduled on the docket today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.